Welcome to the Women in Maintenance podcast, a place where women in maintenance share their stories. I'm Caitlin Young-Gilbert, the host of this podcast and chief of staff over at UpKeep. I'm also the founder of the maintenance community located at upkeep.org. Each episode, I'll be meeting with female leaders in maintenance to discuss their career journeys and share best practices to help other women within the maintenance community thrive. Today, I am very excited to have Nancy Regan on the show. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you, Caitlin. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Of course. And Nancy, we have quite a background to share for you. Nancy is the founder of rcmtrainingonline.com with over 24 years of experience working in the industry. Nancy is extremely passionate about reliability-centered maintenance, RCM, fueled by her long-established belief that each person in the industry should learn the powerful principles behind RCM. As a leading authority in reliability-centered maintenance, Nancy also went on to author her own book, The RCM Solution, a practical guide to starting and maintaining a successful RCM program. And we heard a little bit about your background, but I'd love to hear in your own words how you first got started in this industry and anything else you'd like to share.
Okay, well, the universe had a lot more to do with it than I consciously had to do with it. When I was a senior in college, the Naval Air Systems Command came and recruited at our university for an internship with the Naval Air Systems Command. And so I applied and I interviewed and I got the job. So I started working right out of college and I moved around a lot, but I ended up at the Naval Air Warfare Center in Lakehurst, New Jersey. And if any of you out there have ever been an intern, then you may know that you don't always get the most exciting work. You don't always have a lot to do. And I'm not that kind of a person. I'm like, my husband calls me a hummingbird. I need to be busy and I need to be thinking, and I want to be able to contribute as well as I can. So I was really bored until one day I got to work and it was just past 8 a.m. and my phone rang and it was my supervisor, Fred. So, I answered the phone and he says, "Hey, Nancy, have you got a few minutes?" And I'm thinking, I just got here, I got the next 8 hours. What can I help you with? But I just said, sure, I'll be right up. So I take my notebook and I go up to his office and I sit down and he looks at me and he says, "Nancy, we've been tasked from above to do reliability-centered maintenance on our equipment to reduce maintenance costs." So I've got my notebook and I write down reliability-centered. What did he say? I think he said maintenance. I write it down. He said, "I need you to go figure out what that is and what we have to do to implement it here at Navy Lakehurst." So how was I to know that this 10-minute meeting on an otherwise ordinary day in August 1997 would quite literally set the trajectory for the rest of my life? So that's how I got into RCM. I had very little to do about it in the beginning.
Everyone always asks, what was your journey to coming into this? And you say, oh, they picked me. RCM picked me, is what I'm hearing.
It picked me. And I'll be honest with you, I never wanted to be an engineer. I was looking through the course catalog and the courses sounded cool. I actually said that out loud. And so there was something inside of me that kind of bubbled up when I saw those courses. And it was exactly the degree program I needed to get me to where I am now.
Yeah, your intuition knew.
Yeah.
And with an early start and exposure to RCM, what was the defining moment where you knew, okay, I'm passionate about this industry. I want to explore this. This is for me.
So I started out as a civilian Navy employee. And we started, like I mentioned with Fred, we started doing RCM because we had to reduce maintenance costs. Now, generally or typically in our industry, what I find, at least with the clients I've worked with over the decades, is that an organization is either not doing much maintenance at all and their reliability is suffering, or they're doing way too much maintenance. They're doing stuff they don't need to do, but they still have poor reliability and increased costs. In the case of where I started with support equipment, what we realized after we started to do RCM was that we were way over maintaining our equipment. So the defining moment was the very first analysis I ever facilitated. It was on an aircraft tow tractor. And the maintenance before versus the proactive maintenance after was markedly different. And it was how much maintenance we were doing was much less. It was the light bulb moments that I saw come on in some of my working group members, as well as leadership, because we learned, reliability centered maintenance teaches you many of the rules of maintenance, right? You don't do preventive maintenance like a scheduled replacement or a scheduled restoration on something that fails randomly, because that just doesn't make any technical sense. Well, we found all kinds of things like that in the maintenance plans at the time that we were working on. So number one, that in various working group members and leadership, it was kind of like a light bulb moment. Oh my gosh, we don't need to do all of this. But the other thing was that it involves directly operators and maintainers. And there's something about having that skill, that hands-on skill to be able to troubleshoot, diagnose and fix something that I just respect, and it just kind of wows me. So I loved being able to see that, and they were delighted to be part of the process, because generally speaking, people don't ask them what they think. They just say, here's the maintenance, go do it. So they were involved in it. So it was that first analysis where I saw all of that really just did it for me. And I fell in love. It stole my technical heart forever.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I just love hearing your stories from your journey in this. And if you don't mind, I'd love to go back to when you were talking about how you were an intern called up to the manager's office and given this topic of go find out what that is, go find out what RCM is, and then how we implement it. How did you go about doing that, being a young intern, right? Junior in your career, how did you go find this topic out? And then how did you bring that to the establishment and say, like, all right, I am the authority now. This is what we're going to do.
Okay. So the first thing I did is I called the NAVAIR, Naval Air Systems Command. I called NAVAIR RCM headquarters, so to speak. And the person that I got on the phone said, I'm sorry, we're way too busy to train anyone else. Because where I called, it's the Naval Air Systems Command. So they were doing RCM on airplanes, and they were just apparently very busy. But what I learned like a year or so after is the person on the phone shouldn't have said that. They should have said, yeah, we can train you. But it was, again, the universe stepping in. So I remember, it's like in my superconscious, I remember that, like, and I didn't know any better. So, okay, I hung up the phone and I got on Google and I Googled reliability centered maintenance. And I luckily ended up within what was then led by John Mowbray, the Aladon network. And so I first learned reliability centered maintenance by using reliability centered maintenance 2, RCM 2, which is a commercial version of RCM, but compliant with the international standard. But that's how I got to meet and know my mentor, John Mowbray. So again, it was like perfection. So I was able to, through the Aladon network, I got trained. So I learned reliability centered maintenance, the right way to do it. And I learned from, one of the masters. John he's passed away now, but I got to learn from him, and I'm really grateful for that. So, I took an introductory course, and then I took a facilitator course, then I took a practitioner course. And then, of course, by doing it, that's really how you become an expert in anything is, of course, with actually doing it. So, and that's been like my laser focus is just reliability centered maintenance. That's my little niche within reliability, but it's big enough for me.
Right. I think thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it's so important that our young professionals or people coming into this career hear that, because sometimes they listen to these stories of authorities like yourself and they hear, oh, I fell into it, and with hard work, now I am the expert in it, right? But it's important to hear, like, there was a time you had no idea what this was, and you too Googled it and you reached out to people. And, people are sometimes wonder, well, how do I get a mentor? And you just have to ask questions, be authentic in that. And that's what I'm hearing from your story, is that you too didn't know what this was or how to make a career out of it. And it was one step at a time.
It was definitely one step at a time. But one of the key ingredients, of course, is, work really hard. I mean, and it wasn't just that easy. There were there were roadblocks along the way, but that's life. But I stuck with it. And I'll tell you one thing that John Mowbray taught me a lot of things, but one, he would always end the conversation by saying patience and persistence. And really, it's not just like a phrase, like a quote. I mean, if you've got patience and you've got persistence and you just keep going, you will eventually get there.
It's a great mindset, and no matter your industry, So we mentioned earlier, you are the author of the RCM Solution. So you've literally written the book now. What struck you to take your years of experience and decide to document it and really take on a book?
Especially before COVID, I would go to so many conferences every year. And before I had written my book, I would walk around the bookstore that was there at the conference. And at first I was like, wow, these people wrote a book. And then I would keep going. And then all of a sudden, it's like this little seed is dropped inside my heart. And it was like, well, you could write a book. And then it becomes this, I have to write a book. So from a conscious level, I really wanted to document everything that I had learned. I wanted to memorialize, so to speak, my journey or my career with what I learned, and to hopefully share it with people, that it would be helpful. So that was like the conscious thing. But then there was something inside of me that was just like, I have to do this now. And if I don't do it, I will feel like I missed out on something that I was supposed to do. So that's how that came alive.
What advice do you have to others who may be considering writing a book?
Okay, I love this question, because number one, you don't have to be a wizard to write a book. I think I will just speak for myself. Before I wrote a book, when I met an author of a book, like say, just for example, in our industry, it's like, wow, this guy or this gal wrote a book. And it is wow. It's wow because it takes a lot of work. So writing a book is simple, but it's not easy. And there's a big difference between simple and easy. And I remember I ordered books on how to write books. I Googled videos on how to write books. And let me save everyone out there the trouble. Everyone who wants to write a book, here's how you write a book. Open up Word and start typing. It's like the hardest thing to do is to get going. But once you do, and I'm going to come clean, I pushed off the deadline with my publisher twice. And it wasn't because I didn't have the knowledge. Now I had this deadline and I had to get it done. And you just keep writing. And then I have a very dear friend who was so good to me and read every chapter and gave me his feedback. He's an engineer too, so he could give me some constructive feedback. So really, that's it. Just sit down and write it. You can, especially if you have the desire. You absolutely 100% can write a book.
All right, so this is what I'm hearing. Number one, there's no way to prepare. You just have to start. Number two, don't push back your deadlines. Just keep going.
Yep.
And number three, the most important thing is believing in yourself. And, first draft doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be a start.
Oh, yes. And okay, once it's published and it's hardback and in your hands, it's still not perfect. It's never going to be perfect. If you want a perfect book, you're going to have to move to fantasy land. As soon as my book was out, I was reading and I'm like, oh, there's a mistake. I should have said it this way, but that's just life. I call it the prison of perfection. Nothing is ever going to be perfect, but I can promise you this. Whatever you produce will be perfectly imperfect. And that's what you need to strive for.
So the last tip I'm hearing is make sure you set your expectations to really make sure you could celebrate the accomplishment and not always be putting yourself down thinking it's not perfect, because it won't be.
Yeah.
That's excellent. I think that is also very important to apply to lots of different parts of your life, not just writing a book. So thank you for sharing that. All right, next question for you. You've accomplished many career milestones and advanced to lots of different leadership roles. What do you think are some of the most important ways to support female leadership in our industry?
The number one, and it definitely applies to women, but honestly, it really applies to any human being, And here's one of the biggest messages I'd like to share today, and what I've learned is that if you have the desire to do something, then that means you have everything inside of you to bring that to fruition. Because I love the word desire, because desire is the manifestation of power inside of us. Now, we have the desire, and now I'm here to say 100%, that's manifested power. But the problem is, we live on planet Earth, and on Earth, there is what I've come to know as duality, right? There's sickness and there's wellness. There's light and there's darkness, and there's day and night. So there's always going to be this duality that we have to deal with. And as part of that duality as human beings, we've got all of these invisible obstacles that are always coming at us, namely fear, the voices, like the things in our head that say, no one would ever want to read something you have to say. Why would they ever want to hear from you? You have nothing good to say. Well, who are you? You're just this little girl from Everett, Massachusetts. Well, even if you say it, it's going to be wrong. I mean, I don't know about you, but it's like, almost every day you have to deal with these voices. So that's natural. That's just part of life. There are techniques you can use to deal with those things. But if you have the desire, then you have the power to do it. That's number one. The other one is you have to seriously work at it. You have to be patient, and you have to be persistent. And there's something about the work that if you don't, a lot of times you hear people like you have to like have a plan. Okay, what's your plan to get something done? I tried that and I threw the plans out the window. So I plan for like the next month or so as far in advance as I can, because what I find is if I just get going with something, the next thing just naturally I know what to do, or like the universe will just send the next opportunity or the assistance that I need. And it's really just all physics, right? Momentum is mass times velocity. So if you consider mass like the thing that you're doing, if you're not doing anything, then your velocity is zero and you have no momentum. But as you start to do more and more and more, your momentum just naturally picks up. And the more you do, it's like it starts to silence the voices. Like, I really can do this. And there are people who want to listen, who need your message. Whoever you are out there and whatever you want to do, if you have that desire, that's your manifested power. And there are people who need to hear what you have to say or learn from you what you know.
Nancy, talking with you is always a inspirational pep talk for the rest of my day. So I'm so grateful for the time you spent today. Can you share a little bit more about how can people follow your journey, connect with you?
Definitely, yes. If you're not already one of my connections on LinkedIn, my handle on LinkedIn is Nancy Regan RCM. So please do send me a connection request and maybe say that you heard me on this podcast. And you can go to my website, which is rcmtrainingonline.com. And I'm going to have a pop-up on there that I'm working on something new on how to deal with all these things like fear and the voices and us trying to be perfect. So I'm working on something new that I'm excited to share with everyone. So you could maybe pop in your name and email address for updates on that. I'd be delighted that you would maybe join me on that.
That is amazing. I will be doing it myself, and maybe we can have a future conversation where we can talk about all this new adventure. Amazing. This new adventure. Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Nancy, for joining us. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to today's episode of the Women in Maintenance podcast. I am Caitlin Young Gilbert, your host and Chief of Staff at UpKeep. I'm also the founder of the maintenance community at upkeep.org. You can connect with me on LinkedIn or in the maintenance community Slack group. Feel free to ask us any follow-up questions from today's episode or suggest future topics in the maintenance community Slack group. Again, you can sign up at upkeep.org. Hope to connect with you all soon. Until next time.
Thanks. Bye-bye.